Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves on the misty slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the cool mountain air mingles with a light silver fog that seems to breathe. The ground beneath you is damp with morning dew. The scent of fresh pine and wild thyme fills your lungs, and above the towering cliffs loom their shadows, casting a quiet, ancient mystery. In the distance, you hear the soft murmurs of the sacred spring of Castalia, its waters shimmering like liquid silver. Birds chirp lazily in the cold morning light, but there's a hush that seems to linger here, a hush that speaks of secrets too old to remember, too sacred to be forgotten. You are walking the sacred path to Delphi, a place whispered about in distant lands, a place where kings have trembled and empires have risen and fallen. The oracle of Delphi, center of the world. The omphalos, the navel of the earth, is just beyond the next bend. But as you climb each step slower than the last, the mist thickens and the path winds like a serpent's coil. But don't be fooled by the peaceful stillness. This place has seen more drama, more whispers of fate, and more tragic misinterpretations than even the wildest of ancient myths. The wind hums against the cliffside, a low melodic sigh, and it feels almost as if it's trying to tell you something. Perhaps a riddle, perhaps a warning. In the shadows, statues of forgotten gods loom, stone eyes, staring with a solemn intensity, vines crawling over their shoulders. The temple columns ahead rise, like the bones of ancient titans streaked with age and crowned by pale mist. You step carefully, the marble beneath your feet polished by centuries of seeking footsteps, kings and peasants alike, all hoping to hear the voice of the gods. Soon the scent of burning incense wafts toward you, sweet spicy, with a hint of something unfamiliar, something almost intoxicating. It's the sacred incense burned for Apollo, the god of light, prophecy, and music, who claimed this sacred site as his own. But why are you here? Why have you come? Maybe you're a weary traveler seeking answers about the future, or a troubled soul yearning for reassurance. Or maybe you're simply curious. Curious about the oracle, about the woman who sits in a trance, breathing in the holy vapors and whispering riddles that can make or break empires. As you approach, you see other pilgrims, some in tattered robes, clutching meager offerings of olives and honey, others in rich garments, their golden jewelry catching the pale light. They speak in hushed tones, their eyes filled with a mixture of awe, fear, and desperate hope. And then there it is, the great temple of Apollo. Its grand columns rise still majestic, even in their weathered state. Marble walls streaked with age, golden statues of the gods peeking through the mist, and in the center a grand altar where a priest in white robes tends to a crackling fire. But the true heart of this place, the true soul of Delphi, is just beyond those columns. In the dark, sacred inner chamber sits the Pythia, the oracle of Apollo, a woman chosen by the priests, pure of spirit, now seated on a high tripod above a chasm in the earth. From the darkness beneath her, a faint swirling mist rises the sacred vapors. She leans forward, her eyes half closed, her lips moving in silent whispers. Is she speaking to the gods? Is she listening, or is she simply lost in a dream so vivid that she cannot wake? Her face is serene, but there's a subtle tension in her brow, a slight tremor in her fingers. You watch as a priest with careful ritual steps approaches her, asking the question, brought by a weary traveler. A farmer perhaps worried about his harvest, or a young warrior uncertain of his fate in the coming battle. And then the Pythia speaks. Her voice is soft at first, a murmured whisper, but it grows louder, though never clear. Her words are strange, poetic twisting and turning, like the mist around her. They are not answers, but riddles, words that both reveal and conceal light and shadow dancing in perfect, frustrating balance. The traveler listens, his brow furrowed, trying to grasp the meaning. The priests nod their faces neutral, though who knows how many of them truly understand what she means. And so it has always been here at Delphi, a place of answers that bring more questions, a place where the gods speak, but never plainly, a place where prophecy is both a blessing and a curse. But why riddles? Why not speak plainly? Why hide the truth in shadows and poetry? That's a mystery even the priests of Apollo struggle to answer. And yet as you stand there, the mist curling around your feet, the scent of incense thick in the air, you begin to feel it, the ancient gentle pull of this place. You stand there, the mist dancing around your feet, and the sound of the sacred spring murmuring in the distance. But the air grows heavier with a sense of something ancient, older even than the temple itself. A place where legends are born, where the gods once walked among mortals. And it is here, in this hallowed sanctuary, that you begin to hear a story, a tale of how this sacred place came to be. Long before the temple of Apollo stood here, this was a wild, untamed land, a place where the rocky cliffs of Mount Parnassus sheltered deep forests, home to creatures both beautiful and terrifying. Travelers spoke of a terrible beast that lurked among the shadows, a monstrous serpent named Python. Its coiled body could wrap around a mountain, its scales glistening like molten bronze and its eyes cold and venomous, seemed to pierce the soul of any who dared to wander too close. But Python was not just any beast. It was a guardian, some say a spirit of the earth itself, born from the Osset, dark ancient forces beneath the world. A creature that knew the secrets of the deep places where the world whispered its oldest truths. But for all its power, Python was a creature of darkness, and it ruled this sacred spring with a cold, unyielding presence. Then came Apollo, the god of light, youth music, and prophecy, a radiant figure crowned with a laurel. Wreath his golden bow slung over his shoulder, his silver arrows shining like falling stars. Young, beautiful, and brimming with divine pride, Apollo looked down upon the misty slopes of Mount Parnassus and saw Python's shadow coiling through the valley. And Apollo was not a god to be challenged. With a voice that rang like a silver lyre, he called out to Python, declaring this place his own, a sacred site where his voice would guide mortals and his light would banish the shadows. Python's hiss echoed through the mountains, a low, thunderous growl that seemed to shake the earth itself. The two clashed in a battle of divine fury and ancient might. Arrows of light soared from Apollo's bow, piercing the mist, their radiant tips cutting through the darkness. Python lunged and coiled its scales, reflecting the blinding light, its venomous breath scorching the trees. But Apollo's divine strength was too much. His final arrow struck Python deep, and with a terrible, earth-shaking cry, the serpent fell. Its massive form slumped against the rocks, its coiled body unraveling, and as its life faded, the darkness it had spread over the land seemed to melt away. The sacred spring, once clouded and bitter, ran clear again, its waters sparkling like liquid crystal. But even in death, Python's presence lingered, for from its dying breath, a strange vapor rose from the earth, a mist that swirled up from the cracks in the rocky ground, sweet and intoxicating, but with a touch of something darker, something ancient. This vapor would become the sacred breath of the oracle, a whisper from the earth itself, carrying the voice of the gods, but always tinged with a hint of mystery of shadow. Apollo claimed this sacred spring as his own, and the place would be known as Delphi. He established his temple here, a place where mortals could come seeking answers, but they would receive those answers only through his chosen voice, the Pythia, the priestess who would breathe in the sacred vapors and speak the god's will. But why choose a human to speak his words? Some say it was Apollo's sense of irony, a god of light choosing to speak through a voice veiled in darkness and mystery. Others believe it was a test, a way of reminding mortals that truth is never simple, that even the light can cast shadows. But there was another reason, a secret, that even the priests of Delphi only whispered of. They believed that in those sacred vapors rising from the earth, Python's spirit still lingered, twisted and bound, its ancient wisdom mixing with Apollo's divine voice, a voice of light and shadow, of truth and riddles forever intertwined. You watch as the sacred mist drifts lazily around the great temple, the pale smoke rising from cracks into the earth, curling around the columns like ghostly fingers. Somewhere within the Pythia sits breathing in that ancient breath, her eyes half closed, her lips moving in strange whispered words. But as you turn to leave, you notice something peculiar. An old priest, his robes frayed, but his eyes sharp, stands watching you. There's something in his gaze, something knowing. He smiles a thin, secretive smile, and whispers almost as if speaking to the mist itself. Even the brightest light casts a shadow, and even the clearest prophecy is clouded. His words linger in your mind as you make your way back down the sacred path. The air is cooler now, the mist a little thinner, and the birds have begun to stir in the trees. But the weight of this place, of its ancient stories and whispered secrets, stays with you, because here at Delphi, the light of Apollo may shine, but in the shadows, Python's ancient wisdom still coils, whispering riddles even the gods cannot silence. The mist thickens again as you step closer to the heart of Delphi, where the sacred temple of Apollo looms, its towering columns stretching upward pale and majestic against the gray sky. The scent of incense lingers in the air, sweet and smoky, drifting from braziers tended by solemn priests. But today, your gaze is drawn not to the towering stone, nor to the bustling courtyard filled with murmuring pilgrims, but to a figure seated in the shadows, clad in simple robes, her hair adorned with a crown of laurel leaves. This is the Pythia, the oracle of Delphi, the voice of Apollo and the soul of this sacred place. But who is she really? Is she a priestess chosen for her purity and devotion? Or is she something else, an ordinary woman touched by divine madness? The truth, like so much here, is veiled in mystery. For the oracle is not just one woman, but many chosen over the centuries. Young, middle-aged, sometimes elderly, each selected through secretive rituals, each stepping into the sacred role with trembling hands. And yet while the names may change, the title remains the same, Pythia. You watch as she sits upon a high three-legged stool, the sacred tripod raised above a deep-shadowed chasm in the temple's inner sanctum. From this dark crevice, a faint swirling mist, rises a pale ghostly breath that twists around her, caressing her face. She inhales her chest, rising slowly, her eyes half closed, her lips parting in a whisper. But what is this mist? The priests say it is the breath of the gods, a divine vapor carrying the will of Apollo. Yet rumors among the pilgrims speak of something darker. They say the mist is a poison fumes rising from the earth, from deep unknown places where ancient powers still slumber. Even scholars today are divided. Some believe it is a natural gas ethylene, or perhaps some other compound seeping from beneath the earth. A gas that can induce a dreamlike state, a trance. Others argue that it is purely symbolic, that the mist is merely incense, its hypnotic scent, guiding the Pythia into a meditative trance. But as you watch, none of this seems to matter. For here in this sacred chamber, the mist is not just a gas or a symbol, it is a bridge between two worlds. A whisper from the depths of the earth, a voice from the heavens above. And the Pythia, with her gentle rhythmic breathing, her head tilted slightly back, is the bridge between these worlds. Her voice is soft, but it is not her own. It is Apollo's voice, they say, though some whisper it is the voice of something older, something wilder. You notice a priest step forward, his white robes catching the pale light. He carries a small silver bowl filled with clear water drawn from the sacred spring of Castalia. He offers it to the Pythia, and she sips her fingers, trembling slightly. The water is meant to purify, to clear her mind for the visions to come. But does it truly purify, or is it simply part of the ritual, a soothing touch in a moment of madness? For in a few moments, as the vapors thicken around her, the Pythia's face changes. Her calm expression gives way to a subtle tension. Her brow furrows, her lips quiver, and her voice once a murmur rises. 3 paths diverge. Only one leads to the mountain. But which one, the wind knows. The shadows dance. The words are a riddle, a strange puzzle that seems to tumble from her lips without thought. Her voice rises and falls like the wind itself, sometimes clear, sometimes lost in a whisper. She speaks of mountains and rivers of eagles, and serpents of distant lands, and hidden treasures. But none of it is plain. Every sentence twists like a vine, curling around a tree. Those gathered lean forward, desperate to grasp the meaning, but the words slip through their fingers like mist. Even the priests listen with quiet intensity, their faces neutral, though their eyes betray a hint of uncertainty. For this is the nature of the oracle. Her wisdom is veiled in shadows, her prophecies never clear. A king may ask whether he will win a war, and the oracle may answer, a great empire will fall. But whose empire? His or his enemies? It is for the seeker to decide, to interpret, to risk. But why this riddle-filled language? Why not speak plainly? Some say it is the nature of the divine truth is too great, too overwhelming to be spoken in simple words. Others believe it is Apollo's own playful spirit, his love for poetry and paradox. But among the priests there is a quieter, darker explanation. They say the gods speak in riddles because they do not care whether mortals understand. They are not here to help. They are here to watch, to test, to play. To them, mortals are like children, chasing shadows, reaching for sunlight that dances just beyond their grasp. Yet the Pythia, for all her divine power, is still human. Her voice trembles, her breathing quickens, and there are moments, brief, fleeting moments, when her eyes seem to flicker with fear. Because in this sacred trance, she is not just speaking Apollo's words. She is lost in them, drowning in them. And then just as suddenly as it began, the vision ends. The mist begins to thin. The light in the chamber softens, and the Pythia's voice fades. Her head droops, her breathing slows, and for a moment, she is just a woman again, tired, dazed, and pale. The priests step forward, gently helping her from the tripod. Their hands steady, their faces kind, but practiced. This is not the first time, and it will not be the last. Another woman will take her place, perhaps in a few years, perhaps sooner. But the oracle will always speak, and the riddles will always twist and turn. You step back, the sacred mist brushing against your cheek, leaving a faint, cool sensation. And as you turn, the whispers of the Pythia's riddles still echo in your mind. A river runs backward, a child is crowned, a throne is claimed by the shadow. But what does it mean? Even the priests may never know. Yet for as long as this sacred mist rises, the oracle will speak, and the riddles will dance, caught between the light of Apollo and the shadow of Python. The mist begins to thin, and you step away from the shadowed chamber where the Pythia sits, her whispered riddles still dancing in your mind. But even as you walk among the towering columns of the temple, another thought begins to take root, a question that seems as old as Delphi itself. Why riddles? Why must the oracle's words always twist and turn, leaving those who seek answers more confused than when they arrived? The answer, as with all things here, is both simple and deeply tangled in legend. Some say it is Apollo's way of teaching mortals humility, a reminder that the truth is never simple, that wisdom is earned, not given. Others whisper of the god's playful nature, his love of poetry and paradox. But there is one story that seems to capture the essence of it all, a story of Apollo's laughter, of a mortal's pride, and of a lesson that even the gods found amusing. It begins in a quiet olive grove not far from the temple. A young shepherd named Melanthus, known for his clever tongue and his pride in his own wit, would often boast to his friends that he could outsmart anyone, even the gods. His riddles were famous among the villagers, clever twisting puzzles that left most listeners scratching their heads. But for Melanthus, this was more than just a game. It was a way to prove his own cleverness, a way to stand above others. One day, while tending his sheep in the cool shade of the grove, Melanthus saw a bright, radiant figure appear among the trees. Tall, golden-haired, his robes shimmering like sunlight. It was Apollo himself, though Melanthus, in his pride, did not recognize him. "Greetings, shepherd." The radiant figure said, his voice warm and melodic. Melanthus smiled, feeling a rush of pride. "Indeed I am. None can match me in the art of clever speech." Apollo smiled, his bright eyes dancing with a quiet amusement. "Then tell me this, young shepherd. I will pose you a riddle, and if you answer it, I will grant you a gift of your choosing. But if you cannot, you will give me something of yours, your staff, your most trusted tool." Melanthus laughed, feeling a spark of excitement. "A simple riddle. This would be easy. Very well, stranger, speak your riddle, and I will solve it before you can even finish." Apollo's smile widened, and his voice grew soft, almost musical. "In spring, I walk without legs. In summer, I dance without wings. In autumn, I fly without feathers. In winter, I sleep without dreams. What am I? Melanthus frowned, his mind racing. He repeated the riddle in his thoughts over and over. Walk without legs, dance without wings, fly without feathers, sleep without dreams. Seconds turned to minutes, and his confident smile began to waver. Sweat beaded on his brow. The sheep grazed quietly around him, oblivious to his struggle. Finally, in desperation, he looked up at the radiant figure. I do not know. I cannot answer. Apollo laughed, a warm, gentle sound that seemed to fill the grove with light. It is the wind, young shepherd. It walks as a breeze dances, as a whirlwind flies, as the autumn gale, and sleeps in the still frozen air of winter. Melanthus stared, his pride shattered. His face, pale, without a word, he offered his staff to the radiant figure, who took it with a kind smile. Remember this shepherd, Apollo said, his voice soft but clear. A riddle is not a weapon to show your cleverness. It is a doorway to wisdom. Those who seek to boast with riddles will always lose, for there is always a greater riddle, just as there is always a greater mind. And with that, Apollo vanished, leaving Melanthus alone beneath the quiet, whispering trees. The shepherd's story became a quiet legend, a tale whispered among the pilgrims who came to Delphi. But it was more than just a story. It was a reminder that riddles were not just puzzles, but lessons. And it was said that from that day forward, Apollo spoke to mortals in riddles, not to deceive, but to teach. But even this story is just one explanation. As you wander the temple grounds, you overhear priests speaking in hushed tones of another reason, one far more practical and perhaps more human. The gods speak in riddles, murmurs an old priest, his voice low and rough because certainty is dangerous. A prophecy that is too clear can spark war, break hearts, or turn a peaceful king into a tyrant. The other priest, younger but attentive, nods slowly. Yes, and there are those who would twist even the clearest prophecy to their own ends. Better to leave the truth wrapped in shadows. Let the seeker find their own meaning. But as you listen, another voice chuckles in an older woman, her face weathered, but her eyes sharp. Or perhaps it is simpler still. She whispers, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Perhaps the gods do not wish to be understood. After all, what is a god if not a mystery? You watch them. These wise and weary servants of Apollo, their faces lined with years of devotion, their voices tinged with quiet reverence. They have spent their lives serving this temple, hearing the riddles, watching as kings and generals come seeking answers only to leave more confused than when they arrived. But for them, the confusion is part of the gift. For a riddle that is easily solved is quickly forgotten. But a mystery, a puzzle that lingers in the mind, can change a life. And so as you stand beneath the towering columns, watching the mist curl and drift, you begin to understand. The oracle's riddles are not a test for the oracle. They are a test for those who come seeking her wisdom. A test of patience, of humility, of understanding. But even as this understanding settles in your mind, another question rises. What happens when someone refuses to accept the riddle, when they hear a prophecy but twist it to suit their pride, their ambition, and in the mist you hear a name whispered, Croesus, the king of Lydia, a man who came seeking wisdom but found only ruin? But that is a story for another step on this misty path. The mist grows heavier, curling around your feet like ghostly tendrils as you continue your journey through Delphi. But now a story begins to whisper in the cold air, a story of pride, prophecy, and the tragic downfall of a king. His name was Croesus, king of Lydia, a land of golden rivers and prosperous cities. He was known as the richest man in the world, his wealth a legend that stretched across the ancient world. Gold flowed like water in his palace, and his treasuries gleamed with the light of countless treasures. Yet, for all his wealth, Croesus was a restless soul, a king who feared the uncertainty of the future. And so driven by his unease, he turned his gaze toward Delphi. He had heard the tales, how the oracle could see beyond the veil of time, how her riddles, though cryptic, had the power to reveal the will of the gods. But Croesus was not a humble man. He did not come as a supplicant, but as a king. His arrival at Delphi was a spectacle. Golden chariots, silken banners, and gifts beyond counting. Golden cups, jeweled necklaces, and even a massive golden lion, all placed before the temple as offerings to Apollo. The priests of Delphi were awed. Never had they seen such wealth laid at the feet of the gods. And yet, among the shimmering treasures, there was a tension in the air. For the oracle was not a merchant to be bought with gifts, and Apollo's voice could not be bent to the will of any man, no matter how rich. Croesus approached the sacred chamber with his head held high, his robes of crimson silk shimmering like fire. His advisors whispered nervously around him, their faces pale, but Croesus smiled. He was certain of his wisdom, certain of his power. For before coming to Delphi, he had tested the oracle. In his pride, he had sent messengers to every great oracle of the ancient world with a single question: what is King Croesus doing at this moment? Only the oracle of Delphi answered correctly. He is boiling a lamb and a tortoise in a bronze pot. A strange, mundane image, but it was true. Croesus had deliberately chosen an odd, unremarkable act, certain that no oracle could guess it. But Delphi had seen through his test. And now, confident in the oracle's power, Croesus came to seek her wisdom. He stood before the priests, his voice loud and clear. "Tell me, O oracle of Apollo, if I march against Persia, will I be victorious?" The Pythia, seated upon her sacred tripod, breathing in the mist that rose from the depths, leaned forward. Her voice, soft and dreamlike, echoed through the chamber. "If you cross the river, Hellas, a great empire will fall. A great empire will fall." Croesus smiled, his heart swelling with pride. A great empire, surely it must be the Persian Empire, the vast sprawling kingdom ruled by Cyrus the Great, his greatest rival. His advisors cheered, their fears swept away. But the priests of Delphi were silent, their faces unreadable. And as Croesus departed, his golden chariots rolling down the sacred path, one old priest murmured to another, "Does he not understand? The oracle's words are clear, but they are not kind." But Croesus heard nothing of these quiet warnings. He returned to Lydia, his heart blazing with confidence. His armies were mustered, his banners unfurled, and his generals spoke of glory and gold. Across the river, Hellas, the Persian Empire, loomed a vast, unstoppable force. But Croesus saw only his own victory. The war began as a blaze of glory. Croesus marched forth his soldiers, gleaming in the sunlight, their shields polished, their spears sharp. The Lydian cavalry, swift and fierce, struck the Persian lines, driving them back. But as the campaign stretched on, the tide began to turn. Cyrus the Persian king was no mere warlord. He was a cunning strategist, a master of patience. His armies withdrew, but only to regroup. His scouts harried Croesus's forces. His archers struck from the shadows. And then as winter set in, Croesus made a fateful choice. He returned to his capital, Sardis, confident that the Persians would not pursue in the cold season. But Cyrus was relentless. His army crossed the mountains in winter, a march that seemed impossible. They surrounded Sardis, laying siege to the Golden City. Within days, Sardis fell. Croesus, his wealth, his pride, and his armies were swept away in a tide of Persian conquest. And as the fires consumed his palace, Croesus remembered the oracle's words, "A great empire will fall." It was his own, captured and brought before Cyrus. Croesus stood silent, his once proud face pale. Cyrus, curious about the fallen king, asked what Croesus thought of his own fate. And Croesus, with a bitter smile, whispered a single name, Solon. The name puzzled Cyrus, and Croesus explained Solon, the wise Athenian, who once told him, "Call no man happy until he is dead." Croesus had been the richest man in the world, but his pride, his ambition, had turned his wealth to ashes. And yet, even in defeat, Croesus was spared. Cyrus, moved by the king's wisdom and humbled by the sight of a once great man, brought low ordered that Croesus be released. The fallen king lived out his days as an advisor in the Persian court, a man who had learned too late that a riddle misunderstood can be more dangerous than a sword. As you walk away from the temple of Apollo, the mist curling around your feet, you cannot help but wonder, did the oracle mean for Croesus to misunderstand? Or was this simply the nature of prophecy, truth wrapped in shadow wisdom, hidden in riddles? One thing is certain, the gods had spoken, but they had not spoken plainly. And in the tangled words of the oracle, a king had found his doom. The cold, misty air clings to your skin as you wander further among the towering columns and sacred statues of Delphi. The tale of King Croesus lingers in your mind, a story of pride and misinterpretation, of a riddle that offered wisdom but delivered ruin. But as you continue, another scene begins to unfold before you, the quiet, sacred rituals of the oracle, performed with solemn reverence, each step a dance older than memory. The Temple of Apollo is not just a place of prophecy, it is a place of ritual. Every word the oracle speaks is born from a carefully maintained tradition, a sacred process that turns a mortal woman into the voice of a god. You step quietly, almost reverently, as you approach the sacred spring of Castalia. Its waters shimmer in the pale light, a crystal-clear stream that flows gently, winding between ancient rocks. This is where the Pythia, the oracle, must first come to purify herself. She kneels by the water, her face reflected in the cool, rippling surface. She dips her hands into the spring, washing her face, her arms, her hair, each gesture slow and deliberate. But this is not just a cleansing of the body, it is a cleansing of the spirit. A reminder that before she can speak for the gods, she must be empty of herself. Her thoughts, her fears, her desires, she must leave them behind in the flowing water. As you watch, the Pythia stands, her wet hair catching the soft light, and she is led by the priests along the sacred path. They walk in silence, their faces solemn, their white robes flowing like mist around their feet. The scent of burning incense drifts toward you, sweet and thick, filling the air with a sense of something otherworldly. The Pythia steps lightly, her bare feet brushing against the cool marble as she is led toward the temple. But before she can enter the sacred chamber, another ritual awaits. The priests offer her a sprig of laurel leaves, freshly plucked from Apollo's sacred tree. She crushes a few leaves between her fingers, their fresh, sharp scent rising like a whisper, a reminder of the god whose voice she is about to speak. And then the sacrifice. A young goat, pure and unblemished, is brought before the altar. Its coat gleams, its eyes calm and dark, unaware of its role in this sacred rite. A priest steps forward, a silver blade in his hand, but the ritual must follow a specific rule. The goat must tremble. If the animal remains still, if it is not moved by the sacred presence, then the gods are silent and the oracle cannot speak. But if it shivers even slightly, if its muscles twitch beneath its snowy coat, then the ritual can proceed. And so the priests pour cold water over the animal's head, a thin stream trickling over its ears, its neck, and there a faint tremor. The priests nod their faces, calm but watchful. The sacrifice is accepted. With a swift, practiced motion, the blade flashes, and the young goat falls. Its warm blood flows onto the altar, a crimson stain against the pale marble, and the priests murmur quiet prayers to Apollo, thanking him for his guidance. But you notice something beneath the calm, practiced gestures. There is tension in their eyes. Even for the priests, this is a moment of quiet fear. For here in this sacred place, they stand on the edge of two worlds, the world of mortals and the world of the divine. The Pythia is led into the inner sanctum, her footsteps light but steady. The chamber is dark, the air cool, but there is a faint pale mist that drifts from the cracks in the stone, a vapor rising from the earth itself. She seats herself upon the sacred tripod, a three-legged stool raised above the chasm in the earth. The mist swirls around her, twisting and curling, and she breathes it in slow and deep. Her eyelids flutter, her fingers tense slightly, and for a moment there is silence. The priests step back, their voices low, chanting a quiet, rhythmic hymn to Apollo. Their words are ancient, their melody soft like a lullaby murmured to a restless child. The air grows thick with the scent of incense, the golden glow of the temple's braziers flickering against the walls. And then the silence is broken. The Pythia begins to murmur, her voice soft, at first a gentle whisper that rises and falls like the wind. Her words are strange, twisted, poetic. She speaks of mountains and rivers of eagles flying through storms of shadows and sunlight dancing together. But even in her trance, even as her voice rises and grows stronger, there is a sense of fragility. Her body trembles slightly, her brow furrows, her lips quiver. For in this moment, she is not merely a woman, she is a vessel, a voice through which the divine speaks. The priests listen, their faces calm, but their eyes sharp. For it is their task to take her words, to record them, to offer them to those who come seeking answers. But to record is one thing, to understand is another. For the oracle's words are always wrapped in riddles, and it is the seeker's fate to unravel them. A king may ask about war, and the oracle may speak of rivers and birds. A farmer may ask about his harvest, and she may speak of storms and shadows. And yet, for all their mystery, the seekers return drawn to this place, to this voice, to this mist that whispers of a truth beyond the reach of reason. And as you watch, the mist thickens around the Pythia, her voice growing louder, her hands trembling as she speaks. A bridge of shadows, a tower of light. The sun sets where the moon rises. Her voice fades, her breathing slows, and at last she is still. The priests step forward, guiding her gently from the tripod, their touch careful, their faces calm. Another Pythia may take her place tomorrow, or perhaps not for years. But the oracle will always speak. The mist will always rise. And somewhere in the temple, the words of the oracle are written down carefully, reverently, but always with the understanding that they are not answers, but puzzles. And it is the seekers who must piece them together. As you step away, the cool mist brushing against your face, you begin to understand. The rituals are not just for the oracle, they are for the seekers. A reminder that wisdom is not a gift. It is a journey that begins not with answers, but with questions. But in that journey, there is always the risk of hearing what you want to hear, of twisting the riddle to suit your own desires. A danger that even the greatest of kings have fallen to. And as you wander through the misty colonnades, you hear the quiet murmurs of a tragic tale, a prophecy misunderstood, a life destroyed, the story of Oedipus. The mist swirls at your feet, the cool, damp air clinging to your skin, as the whispers of Delphi continue to weave their tales around you. But now you hear another story, a story of fate, of prophecy, and of a man who tried to escape his own doom, only to run straight into its grasp. A story older than the stones of this temple. The tragic tale of Oedipus. You see him now, a young man, his face sharp with determination, his eyes bright with youth, but shadowed by fear. Oedipus, Prince of Corinth, a man burdened with a terrible secret he does not yet know, raised by loving parents. King Polybus and Queen Merope, he grew up believing he was destined for greatness. But beneath this happy childhood lay a shadow, a whisper he could not ignore. One day, in the bustling marketplace of Corinth, a drunken old man staggered toward him, his breath sour, his voice a slurred mockery. "Ha, Prince of Corinth." The old man laughed, his cracked lips twisting into a cruel grin. "You a prince? Ask your parents, boy. Ask them who you really are." The words struck like a knife. And that night, as the city slept beneath the starlit sky, Oedipus's mind raced. Was it true? Was he truly their son? Or was he something else? Something shameful, something they had tried to hide. Driven by fear, he confronted his parents, but their kind smiles and soothing words did little to ease his doubts. Their denial felt too perfect, too practiced. The shadows of suspicion grew gnawing at his heart. And so, in his desperation, he did what so many before him had done. He traveled to Delphi. He walked the sacred path you now stand, upon his footsteps light, but his heart heavy. The mist whispered around him, the scent of incense filling the air, and the great columns of Apollo's temple rose before him. He knelt before the priests, his voice steady, but his hands trembling. I seek the truth. Who am I? What is my fate? The Pythia, seated upon her sacred tripod, her eyes half closed, breathed in the holy vapors. Her lips moved, her voice soft and dreamlike, but her words struck like thunder. You will kill your father, you will marry your mother, you will bring ruin upon your house. Oedipus's heart froze. Kill his father, marry his mother. The words twisted in his mind like dark, venomous serpents. He stumbled back, his breathing fast, his pulse racing. But even in his fear, his pride would not let him see the truth. He did not ask for clarity, did not question the oracle further. Instead, he chose a path that seemed like wisdom, but would become his doom. I must leave Corinth, he whispered, his voice shaking. I must escape. If I never see my parents again, I can never harm them. And so Oedipus fled. He left Corinth behind, the city of his childhood, the parents he had always loved. He became a wanderer, a traveler on the lonely roads of Greece. But in trying to escape his fate, he was rushing straight toward it. One day, as he walked a narrow mountain pass, the sun burning hot overhead, he encountered a grand chariot blocking the way. A proud, gray-haired man in fine robes rode within his servants, urging Oedipus to step aside. But Oedipus, his pride wounded by the man's arrogant commands, refused. Harsh words were exchanged, then shouts, then violence. In a fit of rage, Oedipus struck down the man and his servants, their bodies falling to the dust, their cries fading beneath the rustling leaves. Oedipus breathed heavily, the sweat on his brow mixing with the dust of the road. He did not know it then, but he had just killed his true father, King Laius of Thebes. And with each heartbeat, he stepped closer to his tragic destiny. In time, his wandering brought him to Thebes, a city shrouded in fear, terrorized by a monstrous creature, the Sphinx. A creature with the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and the face of a woman perched upon a rocky cliff, blocking the city's gates. Her voice was a soft, cruel whisper, her smile a twisted riddle. Answer my riddle, or die, she hissed to all who approached. And her riddle was a simple question. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? One by one, the bravest men of Thebes tried and failed. Their bones littered the mountainside, their screams lost to the wind. But Oedipus, with his quick mind and his stubborn pride, did not hesitate. Man, he answered, his voice calm but clear. As a child, he crawls on all 4s. As an adult, he walks on the 2 legs. And in old age, he uses a cane, a 3rd leg. The Sphinx's smile froze her eyes wide with shock, and then with a terrible cry, she hurled herself from the edge of the cliff, her monstrous body tumbling into the darkness below. Thebes was saved, and Oedipus became a hero. The grateful citizens raised him to the throne, and he married their widowed queen, Jocasta. He did not know it then, but she was his mother. Years passed, and Oedipus ruled Thebes with wisdom and strength. He and Jocasta had children, a family that seemed blessed by the gods. But shadows lingered beneath their happiness. Thebes was struck by plague, a terrible sickness that swept through the streets, leaving death in its wake. Desperate Oedipus turned once more to the oracle of Delphi, demanding to know the cause of the plague. And the answer came cold and clear. The land is cursed, for it shelters the blood of a murderer, one who has slain his own kin. Oedipus, burning with righteous fury, vowed to find the killer, not knowing that his search would bring him to himself. Bit by bit, the truth unraveled. A blind prophet Tiresias warned him, his voice heavy with sorrow. You are the curse, Oedipus. You are the darkness you seek. But Oedipus refused to believe it until the evidence became undeniable. He learned of his true birth, of his father's death, upon the mountain road of the woman he had married, the woman who was his mother. Jocasta, in horror and shame, took her own life, a silken cord twisted around her neck. And Oedipus, shattered by the truth, seized a golden brooch from her dress and plunged it into his own eyes, blinding himself. I was blind, he whispered, blood streaming down his face, long before I saw. In the end, Oedipus became a wanderer once more, a blind old man led by his daughter Antigone, shuffling through the dusty roads of Greece, a living shadow, a king who had lost everything because he tried to escape his fate. The mist around you seems colder, now the wind whispering like the sighs of lost souls. The riddle of the oracle had been clear, but Oedipus, in his pride and fear, had misunderstood. Like Croesus, he had heard what he wanted to hear. And like Croesus, he had been destroyed. But what do you do when even the truth becomes a curse? When the light of knowledge burns instead of heals, perhaps the gods know. Or perhaps even they cannot escape the riddles they weave. The mist thickens around you once more, a pale swirling veil that dances in the cool mountain air as the tragic tale of Oedipus fades into the shadows. But here in Delphi, where every whisper seems to carry the weight of ancient wisdom, you begin to wonder, did the oracle truly foresee Oedipus's fate? Or was it the choices he made, his pride and his fear that led him to his doom? Such questions have always lingered here, just as the mist lingers among the ancient columns. And even the priests of Apollo, wise and solemn, in their flowing robes speak in hushed tones of another tale, a tale of faith, of devotion, and of a woman who became the voice of a god, but whose loyalty was tested by the very deity she served. It is said that Apollo, though a god of light, music, and prophecy, was not always gentle. Like the sun, he embodied his light, could burn as easily as it could warm. And though his oracle the Pythia spoke his will to mortals, there was a time when Apollo himself questioned the faith of his chosen voice. The story begins in the quiet hours of dawn, the mist still thick over Delphi, the sacred spring of Castalia shimmering like a silver thread. The Pythia, a young woman named Daphne, was beloved by the priests for her kindness and her wisdom. She had served the temple for many years, her voice a gentle guide to countless seekers who came in search of answers. But as the years passed, a strange doubt began to grow in Apollo's divine heart. Mortals were fickle, their faith as fragile as a flickering candle. Even those who seemed devoted could falter. And so Apollo devised a test, one that would reveal whether Daphne's devotion was true or merely a role she played. It began with a dream that came to Daphne in the stillness of the night. In this dream, she stood before the great temple, but the sky above was dark, the columns cracked and crumbling, and the sacred spring had run dry. The air was heavy with ash, and the scent of burning filled her lungs. And there in the shadow of the ruined temple, a voice called to her, "The light has left. The god has fallen silent. There is no prophecy, no truth, only darkness. Daphne awoke with a gasp, her heart pounding, her forehead damp with cold sweat. The dream clung to her mind, its dark whispers echoing even in the bright morning light. But she pushed the fear aside, wrapping herself in her white robes, her bare feet cool against the smooth marble, as she made her way to the sacred spring. But as she knelt by the water, she noticed something strange, a faint oily sheen upon the surface, a bitter scent that twisted her stomach. She reached out to touch the water, but drew her hand back, her fingers tingling as though stung. And then, as she looked into the shimmering depths, she saw it, a pale, ghostly face, staring back at her eyes dark and empty. With a cry, she stumbled back, her heart racing. But as she blinked, the vision was gone. Only the clear, crystal water remained calm and pure, yet the fear lingered. The days that followed were no kinder. When Daphne stepped into the sacred chamber to take her place upon the tripod, the mist seemed the thicker, darker, its scent sharp and bitter. Her voice trembled as she spoke her words, more twisted than ever, her visions dark and violent. Kings who came seeking victory, heard of ruin, lovers seeking joy, were warned of betrayal, and even the humble farmer, seeking a good harvest, was told of storms and famine. The priests whispered among themselves, their faces pale, their faith wavering. Had the oracle become cursed? Had the voice of Apollo been tainted? But Daphne, though shaken, continued her duties, her voice calm even as her dreams grew darker. One night, as she knelt in the quiet of the temple, her hands clasped in prayer, she whispered to those shadows, "Great Apollo, have I failed you? Have I angered you? Tell me, please, guide me." But there was no answer, only the soft rustling of the laurel leaves, the faint, distant murmur of the sacred spring. And yet, even in the silence, Daphne's resolve hardened. She would not abandon her place, not until she understood. It was then that a young man arrived at Delphi, a wanderer, his cloak dusty, his face shadowed, but his eyes bright with a quiet, knowing light. He knelt before the temple, his voice gentle but clear. "I seek the oracle." He set his gaze steady upon the priests. "But I come not for a prophecy. I come to ask a question." The priests exchanged uncertain glances, but they led him to the sacred chamber. There, Daphne sat, the mud swirling around her, her hands gripping the edges of the tripod, her breathing slow and measured. The young man stepped forward, his voice calm. "Tell me, O oracle," he whispered, "why do you serve Apollo?" Daphne's lips parted, a faint shiver running through her. It was not a question she had expected, not a question she had ever been asked. Her voice, though hesitant, grew stronger with each word. Because he is the light, the voice of truth. Because his wisdom guides mortals. Because without him there is only darkness. The young man smiled a warm, gentle smile, and as Daphne gazed at him, she saw a faint glow in his eyes, a radiance that seemed to grow brighter. "You speak of light and truth," he said, his voice soft, "but do you serve him because you love him, or because you fear the darkness?" Daphne's breath caught her heart racing, but as she struggled to answer, the young man stepped closer and she saw him clearly. Golden hair, a laurel crown, a face so bright it seemed to shine. "Apollo," she whispered, her voice a breath, her hands trembling. He reached out a gentle hand resting on her shoulder. You have served me well, Daphne. Even when the bank light seemed to fade, even when fear whispered in your dreams, you did not turn away. Faith is not the absence of fear, it is the courage to continue despite it. And with that, the vision faded. The mist cleared the darkness and her dreams vanished, and the spring's waters ran pure and sweet once more. The priests, seeing the light in her eyes, knew that the oracle had been blessed. Daphne continued to serve as the Pythia for many years, her voice a calm, soothing guide to those who came seeking wisdom. But in her heart, she carried a quiet, gentle truth, a truth whispered not just to her, but to all who sought the light of Apollo. Faith is not the absence of darkness. It is the choice to stand in the light, even when the shadows linger. And as you wander through the misty temple grounds, that truth seems to follow you, a soft, warm whisper beneath the cold mountain air. The mist curls gently around your feet as you continue wandering the sacred grounds of Delphi. But now a strange quiet has settled over the temple, a silence that feels heavy, uneasy. The murmurs of the pilgrims seem distant. The flickering braziers cast long shadows, and the scent of incense lingers like a ghostly breath. And then you hear it a whisper, faint but clear. The oracle is silent. The words ripple through the air like a chill wind, and you turn to see the priests, their faces pale, their eyes filled with quiet fear. In the shadowed inner chamber, where the sacred mist once rose, there is now only stillness. No soft, swirling vapor, no gentle, dreamlike whispers from the Pythia. The great temple of Apollo stands silent, its divine voice gone. But how can this be? How can the voice of a god fall silent? The priests whisper among themselves, their voices hushed but frantic. Perhaps the Pythia has sinned. Perhaps Apollo is angry. No, it is the spring. The sacred spring has dried. But why? What does it mean? The pilgrims who have traveled so far, kings seeking victory, lovers seeking fate, mothers seeking the future of their children, all stand outside the temple, their faces marked with confusion, their prayers unanswered. Some weep, others shout demanding answers, but the priests can only lower their heads in shame. The sacred spring of Castalia, once a sparkling thread of crystal clear water, now trickles weakly, a thin, muddy stream. The laurel trees droop, their leaves yellowed and dry. Even the sacred vapors, those pale, ghostly mists that rose from the earth to touch the Pythia's lips, have faded, leaving only cool, stagnant air. But why has the oracle fallen silent? Why has the light of Apollo, once so radiant, dimmed to darkness? The priests offer sacrifices more than ever before. Golden bulls, pure white doves, even rare spices from distant lands. The air is thick with the scent of burning incense, the braziers blazing like tiny stars in the mist. And yet there is no answer. The Pythia seated upon her sacred tripod, her face pale, her lips still cannot speak. Her eyes, once half closed in a trance, now stare blankly into the darkness. Days turn to weeks, and the fear grows. The pilgrims begin to leave their faces bitter, their faith shaken. A king from a distant land curses the temple as he rides away his golden chariot, kicking up dust. A young woman weeps beneath the laurel trees, her prayer for a sick child left unanswered. Even the priests, once so solemn and confident, now wander the temple grounds like shadows, their whispered prayers met with silence. But in the quiet, in the shadow of the temple, another story begins to unfold, a story not of gods, but of men. For while the priests pray and the pilgrims despair, one young priest named Lycos begins to ask a dangerous question. What if it is not Apollo who has fallen silent? What if we have lost our way? Lycos is not like the other priests. Young and curious, he has always questioned the ancient traditions, always wondered whether the sacred mist was truly the breath of the gods or something else. And as the silence of the oracle stretches on, his curiosity grows. Late one night, while the other priests sleep, Lycos takes a torch and walks quietly to the sacred chamber. The great columns rise around him, their shadows stretching like the fingers of giants. The cool, dry air presses against his skin, and his torch flickers weakly in the gloom. But his eyes are sharp, his heart steady. He kneels by the sacred chasm, the dark, jagged crack in the earth from which the vapors once rose. But now there is only a faint, bitter scent, nothing like the sweet, dreamlike fragrance of old. Carefully, he lowers his torch, the warm light casting eerie shadows across the stone. And there in the darkness, he sees it, tiny hairline cracks spreading through the rocks, dry, brittle. The earth itself seems wounded, its ancient breath choked beneath the stone. But why? What has changed? Lycos's thoughts race. The sacred spring has weakened, the laurel trees are dying, the mist has vanished. Could it be the earth itself that is changing, a shift beneath the mountains, a collapse of the hidden caverns that once breathed the sacred mist? Or has something poisoned the spring, tainted the waters? But even as his mind races with questions, a voice echoes from the darkness. You there? What are you doing? Lycos turns, his torchlight falling on a shadowed figure, an old priest, his face hidden beneath his hood, his voice cold. Forgive me, Elder Lycos stammers, his voice steady, despite the cold fear prickling at his skin. I only sought to understand the silence, to know why the oracle no longer speaks. The old priest steps forward, his face emerging from the shadows. His eyes are sharp, his expression calm, but there is a darkness in his gaze. Some questions, young Lycos, are better left unanswered. The gods are silent because they choose to be. Our duty is to serve, not to question. But Lycos does not bow. His gaze meets the old priest's, his voice quiet but firm. Is it the gods who are silent, or have we lost their voice ourselves? For a long moment there is only silence. The torch flickers, the shadows dance, and then the old priest's lips curl into a thin, bitter smile. You are young, he murmurs. You think wisdom is found in questions, but wisdom is knowing when to be silent. With that, the old priest turns and disappears into the darkness, his footsteps soft but measured. But Lycos cannot let go of his doubts. As the days turn to weeks, he searches the sacred grounds. The spring, the laurel groves, even the mountain slopes. He speaks with shepherds, travelers, even old farmers who remember the oracle of their youth. And slowly a picture begins to form, rumors of a distant earthquake, a shifting of the earth beneath the mountain. a change in the underground caverns, a fracture that may have sealed the sacred vapors beneath the rock. But if this is true, then what does it mean? If the mist is gone, if the oracle is silent, is Apollo truly absent, or have they merely lost the ritual, the means to hear him? Was the sacred mist ever truly divine, or was it simply the voice of the earth mistaken for the voice of a god? Lycos's doubts gnaw at him, but he keeps them to himself. For in Delphi, faith is a delicate thread, and even the whisper of doubt can become a storm. But one question haunts him, a question he dares not speak aloud. If the oracle has fallen silent, what are we now? The mist around you seems colder, the quiet deeper as you wander the ancient paths of Delphi. The silence of the oracle is not just the loss of a voice, it is the loss of a light, a guiding star that has led kings and commoners alike. And in that silence there is a shadow, a fear that perhaps the gods were never there at all. But as the wind stirs, rustling the dry leaves of the laurel trees, you hear a soft, distant whisper. Perhaps the oracle is not truly silent. Perhaps the voice of Apollo is simply waiting for those who dare to listen. The silence of the oracle hangs over Delphi like a heavy mist, a silence that chills the soul even more than the cold mountain air. But as the priests pray and the pilgrims despair, another story begins to whisper through the temple, a story not of divine silence, but of mortal ambition. A story of secrets, shadows, and the quiet hidden hands that have always lurked behind the sacred veil of prophecy. For even here, in this place of ancient wisdom, there are those who see the oracle not as a voice of the gods, but as a tool, a weapon, to shape the fates of men. And among them, none are more dangerous than the secretive group known only as the Temple Council. The council is a gathering of the most senior priests, men who have served Apollo for decades, whose faces are lined with age, their eyes cold and watchful. Officially, they are guardians of the sacred rituals, protectors of the oracle's purity. But in the shadowed halls of the temple, they are something else entirely. You see them now seated in a dark, candlelit chamber, their faces half hidden beneath the hoods of their robes. The air is thick with the scent of incense, the flickering light casting eerie shadows on the ancient stone walls. They speak in low, measured voices, their words sharp but calm. Another pilgrim has returned in anger, murmurs one, his voice a dry whisper. The oracle did not speak. They come seeking miracles. Another replies, his tone tinged with quiet disdain, and they leave when they do not hear what they desire. But our coffers are growing thin, grumbles a third, his wrinkled hands clasped tightly. Without the oracle's voice, the offerings dwindle. The priests grow uneasy. Some speak of leaving. The eldest among them, a man with a silver beard and eyes like polished stones, leans forward. His voice is calm but cold. We are the voice of Apollo. Whether the mist rises or not, we are the ones who decide which words are spoken. A quiet murmur of agreement ripples through the chamber. But even here in the shadows of their secret council, there is unease. For while the council has long shaped the prophecies, crafting the oracle's riddles to guide kings and shape the fate of nations, they have always done so with the mist, a sacred breath that lent their words an air of divinity. Without it, Their authority trembles. Their whispered prophecies become mere poetry, their wisdom a lie. But the silver-bearded elder is not one to let power slip so easily. The mist has gone, but the faith of the people remains. He says his voice slow and measured, and faith can be guided. One of the younger priests, his face shadowed, but his voice tense, dares to question. But if the oracle does not speak, how can we guide them? How can we claim to speak for Apollo? A cold smile touches the elder's lips. The oracle has always spoken, through us, through the sacred words we write, through the riddles we craft. The Pythia is a vessel, but a vessel does not choose the wine it holds. There is a quiet murmur of agreement, though some faces remain troubled. But the elder's voice is steady, his eyes sharp. We will tell the people that the oracle has returned, that the sacred mist is faint, but still whispers. And we will write the words she speaks. Kings will come seeking answers, and they will receive them, for we are the voice of Apollo. And so beneath the great temple, in the shadowed chamber, where the sacred truth is whispered, a decision is made. The oracle will speak once more, not by divine breath, but by the hands of men. The next day the priests emerge, their faces calm, their robes flowing like pale mist. They light the braziers, they burn the sacred incense, and they lead the Pythia, a young woman, her face pale and serene, into the sacred chamber. But this time, there is no mist rising from the chasm, no whispering breath of the earth, only the thick, sweet smoke of burning herbs. The Pythia sits upon the sacred tripod, her eyes half closed, her breathing slow, and the priests gather around her, their voices a low, rhythmic chant, their eyes watching her every move. You are the voice of Apollo, they whisper their words, soft but firm. Speak, O oracle, speak the truth that the gods have given you. But the Pythia's lips remain still, her eyes fluttering, her hands trembling slightly. And then the eldest priest steps forward, his voice calm but commanding. Speak, child, the gods are with you. Tell us the fate of those who seek. And slowly, haltingly, the Pythia begins to speak. Her voice is soft, her words strange and dreamlike, but they are not her words. They are the words of the priests, whispered to her in the darkness, written upon scrolls hidden in the folds of their robes. A merchant comes seeking fortune, and the oracle tells him a river of gold flows, but only for the patient. A general asks of war, and the oracle murmurs, victory will come to the one who waits in shadow. A young woman asks of love, and the oracle whispers, a rose blooms, but beware the thorns. The pilgrims listen, their faces filled with awe, their offerings placed gratefully at the temple steps. The coffers swell once more. The fear in the priest's eyes fades, and the council smiles in quiet satisfaction. But not all are blind to the shadow behind the light. Lycos, the young priest, who once searched for the truth in the sacred chasm, watches from the colonnades, his gaze sharp. He sees the Pythia's trembling hands, the faint sheen of sweat upon her brow. He watches the elder priests whispering in her ear, their faces calm, but their eyes cold. He knows the truth. The oracle has not returned. The voice of Apollo is gone. Only the voice of men remains. But what can he do? What is a single priest against the council? And even if he spoke out, who would believe him? The pilgrims crave prophecy. The kings demand guidance. And the temple thrives on faith, even if that faith is a lie. One night, as the moon casts a pale silver glow over the temple, Lycos stands alone beneath the laurel trees, his thoughts heavy, and in the cool night air he whispers to the darkness, "Have we lost the gods, or have the gods lost us?" But there is no answer, only the soft rustling of the leaves, the distant murmur of the fading spring, and the cold, still mist that clings to the mountain slopes. For the oracle has fallen silent, but the priests have not. And in that silence they have found their power. And as you walk through the shadowed colonnades of Delphi, the cold wind brushing against your face, you cannot help but wonder, is it truly faith when the voice of the gods is whispered by those who serve them? Or is it only a shadow, a pale reflection of the light that has gone? But one thing is certain, the oracle may be silent, but the riddles remain. Only now it is not the gods who speak them. It is those who have claimed their voice. The mist of Delphi clings to the ancient columns, swirling like ghostly fingers around the grand temple of Apollo. But now, beneath the quiet surface, there is a whisper of unease, a sense that the light of prophecy has dimmed even as the temple thrives. The priests speak with calm authority. The Pythia's voice rises in gentle riddles, and the pilgrims come and go, their hopes and fears left in the hands of the oracle. But you know the truth. Now the oracle's voice is a shadow, a tale whispered by those who claim to serve the gods. Yet even here in this web of quiet deception, there are those who still seek the light, those who cling to the hope that the oracle is not merely a tool of men. Among them is Lycos, the young priest, who has seen the darkness beneath the temple's sacred veil. But Lycos is not alone in his doubts. One evening, as the mist rolls in thick and cold, Lycos wanders the temple grounds, his thoughts heavy. The laurel leaves rustle in the chill wind, their silver-green edges catching the dying light. And then from the shadows a voice calls out, "You look troubled, Lycos." Lycos turns to see an old woman standing by the sacred spring. Her face is weathered, her hair a tangled silver, but her eyes are sharp, too sharp for one who should be blind with age. She leans lightly on a twisted wooden staff, her gaze steady. "I know you, Lycos," whispers a faint shiver running down his spine. "You are Thea, the old caretaker of the laurel grove." The woman smiles, her lips twisting in a wry, knowing smile. "Caretaker, is that what they call me now? Once I was more. Once I was the Pythia." Lycos's heart skips a beat. He has heard whispers of Thea, an oracle, who served in her youth, whose voice was said to be as clear as the sacred spring. But that was decades ago, before the temple changed, before the council seized its silent grip on prophecy. "I have seen you watching Thea," murmurs her voice soft, but sharp as a blade. "I have seen you staring into the darkness, listening for the truth. But truth is a slippery thing here, child. It hides beneath the light, and those who seek it often find only shadows." Lycos steps forward, his voice a quiet, desperate whisper. "Thea, tell me, did the oracle truly speak in your time? Did the gods truly speak through you?" The old woman's smile fades, her gaze distant. For a long moment she is silent, the wind rustling the laurel leaves like a distant whispered song. And then she speaks, her voice soft but steady. I remember the mist, she whispers, the sweet, faint scent rising from the earth, twisting around my face, filling my lungs. I remember the warmth, the light, and the darkness. I spoke word I did not understand, saw visions I could not explain. And when I awoke, the priest told me what I had said, how I had spoken the will of Apollo. But did you? Lycos presses his voice trembling. Did you truly speak for the god, or was it a dream? A lie. Thea's eyes meet his, sharp and clear. I spoke, but were they my words or his, or something else even I do not know? That is the curse of the oracle, to be a voice without a voice, a vessel for a truth that is never clear. Lycos's shoulders slump, the weight of his doubts pressing down on him. The priests, they write the prophecies now. They guide the Pythia. They twist her words. Thea nods, her gaze hardening. Yes, they are the voice now, not Apollo, not the gods, only men hiding behind a mask of holiness. But why do they do it? Lycos whispers, his fists clenched. Why cling to a lie? Thea's laughter is a dry, bitter chuckle, because power is sweet, child, and prophecy is the sweetest power of all. To speak for the gods is to command kings to bend empires. To weave a riddle is to shape fate itself. But the people believe Lycos murmurs, his voice heavy with sorrow. They come seeking hope. They leave with lies. They leave with what they want to hear. Thea corrects him, her voice sharp. Or what the priests want them to hear. That is the beauty of riddles. They mean whatever you need them to mean. For a moment, there is only silence, the mist curling around them, the scent of laurel leaves mixing with the cool, damp air. But then Thea's gaze softens, and she steps closer, her wrinkled hand resting gently on Lycos's shoulder. But you are different, child. You seek the truth even when it is dark, even when it hurts. Do not let them steal that from you. Lycos's eyes burn with quiet anger, his hands trembling. But what can I do? I am only a priest. They are the council. They control the temple. They decide the prophecies. Thea's smile returns, a soft, gentle smile. They decide the lies. But truth is a flame, child. It may flicker, but it does not die. And with that, she turns her old twisted staff, tapping against the stones as she walks away, her figure fading into the mist. But her words linger, burning in Lycos's heart like a hidden ember. Truth is a flame. That night, as the stars shimmer faintly through the mist, Lycos stands beneath the shadowed colonnades, his mind racing. He watches the priests in their flowing robes, their faces calm, their voices murmuring soft, practiced chants. He watches the pilgrims kneeling before the great temple, their faces filled with hope, their hands clasped in silent prayer. And he knows that the temple is a lie, that the oracle is a shadow, that the voice of Apollo is a mask worn by those who crave power. But he also knows that Thea is right. Truth is a flame, and even in the darkness, even beneath the weight of lies, it can still burn. He cannot expose the council, not yet, but he can learn, he can watch, he can listen, and perhaps one day he can speak, not with riddles, not with shadows, but with light. For even here in the mist of Delphi, the darkness cannot silence the truth forever. And as you walk away, the mist brushing against your face, you feel it too. That quiet, hidden flame, a whisper of light that lingers even in the shadows. The mist swirls thick and cold around the sacred temple of Apollo, but now it seems different, no longer a veil of mystery, but a cloak of secrets, heavy and suffocating. The priests move through the shadowed colonnades, their faces calm, their voices soft, but beneath the surface a quiet tension hums like a distant thunderstorm. Lycos walks among them, his white robes flowing, his gaze steady but sharp. To most, he is just another young priest, another voice in the sacred choir. But beneath that calm exterior, a quiet fire burns, a fire lit by Thea's words, a flame of truth hidden beneath the darkness. He watches the council, those elder priests who speak in whispers but wield power like a hidden blade. He watches the pilgrims, their faces filled with awe, their hands clasped in prayer as they kneel before the great temple. He watches the Pythia, a young woman with pale skin and haunted eyes seated upon the sacred tripod, her voice a soft, trembling murmur. But now he sees it all with new eyes. He sees how the priests stand close, whispering in the Pythia's ear, guiding her words, shaping her prophecies. He sees how they write down her riddles, carefully, twisting them to suit their plans, their ambitions. He sees how they smile, calm and serene, even as they turn faith into a tool, a weapon. And yet Lycos is not alone in his doubts. Beneath the grand pillars of the temple, in the shadowed corners where the sacred light does not reach quiet, whispers spread whispers of the oracle's silence, of the fading spring, of the ancient mist that no longer rises. Some priests wonder quietly if the gods have abandoned them. Others whisper that the council has stolen Apollo's voice. But fear is a powerful force. Most priests stay silent, their doubts buried beneath prayers and rituals. Better to believe the lie than to face the emptiness beneath it. But not Lycos. He has chosen to watch, to listen, and now he begins to understand the true nature of the council's power. For the oracle is not just a voice, it is a promise that the gods are watching, that fate can be known, that truth can be spoken. And those who control that promise control the souls of men. Yet as Lycos studies the council, another question begins to gnaw at him. How long have they controlled the oracle? Was it always a lie? Was there ever a time when the voice of Apollo was true, or has it always been a shadow, a game of whispers and riddles? One night, as the silver moon hangs pale and distant above the mist-shrouded temple, Lycos sits by the sacred spring, his thoughts racing. The water trickles faintly, its once clear flow, now clouded the laurel leaves above rustling softly in the cold breeze. And then a faint rustle of footsteps behind him. He turns, his heart quickening, but it is only Thea, her old twisted staff tapping lightly against the stones. She smiles, her sharp eyes catching the pale moonlight. "You seem troubled, child," she murmurs, lowering herself to sit beside him. "Have you seen enough shadows yet?" Lycos hesitates, his gaze fixed on the dark rippling water. "I have seen too many. I see the council twist the Pythia's words. I see the pilgrims kneel in blind faith, not knowing they are hearing the voices of men, not gods. But I do not know what to do. Thea's smile fades, her gaze thoughtful. And what would you do, Lycos, tear down the temple? Cast out the priests? Would you shatter the faith of the pilgrims? Or would you replace one lie with another? Lycos looks up, his eyes burning with quiet anger. I would bring back the truth. I would make the oracle speak again. Truly. But Thea shakes her head, her silver hair catching the moonlight. Truth is a dangerous flame, child. It can warm, but it can also burn. Even here in the sacred temple of Apollo, not all truths are meant to be spoken. Lycos's hands clench, his voice trembling. Then what is this temple? A place of wisdom or a place of lies? Thea's smile returns a gentle, sad smile. It is both. It is a mirror, child. It shows men what they wish to see, what they fear, what they hope. It is a place of riddles, because truth is a riddle, twisting, shifting, always just out of reach. Lycos feels the weight of her words pressing down on him, but he cannot turn away. But if the oracle was ever true, if the gods ever spoke here, then why have they fallen silent? Why does the mist no longer rise? Why has the spring grown weak? Thea's gaze darkens, her voice soft. Perhaps it is the earth that has changed, or perhaps it is we who have changed. Once the oracle was a voice of humility, of mystery, but the council has turned it into a weapon, a tool of power. They have taken the voice of Apollo and made it their own, and the gods do not smile on those who steal their light. Lycos's heart races his thoughts, a storm of doubts and questions. But before he can speak, Thea reaches out her wrinkled hand, resting gently on his shoulder. Be careful, Lycos. She whispers, her voice calm but firm. Those who seek to reveal the truth often become its first victims. The council is powerful. They have silenced others who spoke against them. They can silence you too. Lycos meets her gaze, his voice steady. But I cannot stay silent. I cannot watch them turn faith into a lie. Thea's smile is sad but proud. Then you are a fool, but a brave one. And perhaps that is enough. She rises, her old twisted staff tapping against the stones as she turns to leave her figure melting into the mist. But her words linger, a quiet flame burning in Lycos's heart. Be careful. Those who seek the truth often become its first victims. The next morning, as the pale light of dawn washes over the temple, Lycos watches the council gather, their faces calm, their voices quiet, but their eyes sharp. The Pythia takes her place upon the sacred tripod, the priests whispering their carefully written prophecies in her ear. But Lycos sees the truth, now sees the shadowed hands that shape the voice of the oracle. And as he watches, a quiet resolve hardens within him. The oracle is a lie, but the truth still waits buried beneath the shadows, and he will find it, even if it means becoming a shadow himself. Days turn to weeks, and the quiet chill of winter begins to creep down the misty slopes of Mount Parnassus. The temple of Apollo stands proud against the gray sky, its grand columns shrouded in pale mist, the sacred laurel trees shedding their silver-green leaves. But beneath the calm surface, the shadows deepen. Lycos moves through the temple like a ghost, watching, listening, his sharp eyes catching every whispered word, his ears attuned to the murmurs of the council. The Pythia continues to speak her voice, a gentle murmur, but her words are not her own. The priests guide her, their whispered phrases shaping the prophecies, their careful hands turning faith into a tool. But Lycos has grown wise. He knows the truth now that the oracle is a stage, and the priests are its playwrights. Yet knowing the truth is one thing, proving it is another. And in a temple ruled by silence and shadows, the truth is a dangerous light. Yet Lycos is not alone. Thea, the old caretaker, watches from the laurel groves, her sharp eyes catching every movement. When the other priests speak of the glory of Apollo, she smiles a quiet, knowing smile. And in the stillness of the night, she whispers stories to Lycos, stories of the oracle's past, of the days when the mist rose thick and sweet, when the Pythia spoke words that none could explain. There was a time, she tells him, her voice a soft murmur, when the oracle was a mystery even to the priests. When the Pythia's visions were wild and strange, when her voice spoke of wonders and horrors that no man could predict. But what changed? Lycos asks, his voice tense, his gaze sharp. Thea's smile fades, her eyes darkening. Men changed. Power is a hungry beast, Lycos. And even here in the temple of Apollo, there are those who feed it. Lycos has heard enough. He knows the council is a shadow, a circle of old men who speak with quiet authority but cling to their power with iron hands. And he knows that if he is to bring back the true oracle, he must first expose the lie. But how? The council is powerful, the priests loyal, the pilgrims blind in their faith. Even the Pythia, that pale, trembling girl seated on the sacred tripod, is a prisoner of their whispered words. To speak against them would be to court death or worse, to vanish into the mist, forgotten and silenced. Yet Lycos is not without allies. In the quiet shadows of the temple, he finds others who share his doubts. Young priests who have seen the council's whispering, who have watched the Pythia tremble, her voice twisted to serve the priest's designs. One night beneath the silver light of the moon, Lycos gathers them a small circle of quiet, watchful faces, their white robes pale in the darkness. They speak in hushed voices, their words a faint whisper against the cold wind. The oracle is a lie, Lycos tells them, his voice steady but fierce. The council has stolen the voice of Apollo. They shape the prophecies, they twist the faith of the pilgrims. But it was not always so. There was a time when the oracle spoke, truly. A young priest with a thin face and sharp-eyed eyes leans forward. But how do we prove it? The Pythia is theirs. The temple is theirs. If we speak out, they will silence us. Lycos nods, his gaze steady. We do not speak. We show. We let the truth speak for itself. They whisper their words, weaving a quiet, dangerous plan. A way to unmask the council's deception without exposing themselves. A way to let the light pierce the shadows. The first step is simple: change the incense. The council burns a sweet, thick incense when the Pythia speaks a blend of herbs that dulls the senses, that leaves her voice soft and dreamy, her thoughts clouded. But Lycos knows the ancient texts, knows that the true incense of the oracle was different. Laurel leaves fresh and sharp, their scent a clear, clean touch of the mountain air. One night when the temple is quiet, Lycos and his allies replace the council's incense with the true blend. The next morning, as the Pythia takes her place upon the sacred tripod, her breathing slow and steady, the sharp, fresh scent fills the air. The council's priests gather, their faces calm but curious. The elder priest, the silver-bearded leader of the council, watches with his cold, sharp eyes, his hands clasped before him. He does not know of the change. The Pythia breathes in the clear, cool scent. Her eyes flutter, her lips part, but her voice is stronger, now clearer. She begins to speak, but her words are not the soft, dreamy riddles the council prefers. They are sharp, strange, wild. I see the mountain burning, a shadow beneath the light, a voice that is not a voice. The priests glance at one another uneasy. The council's leader frowns, his gaze fixed on the Pythia. I see the silver river, the fire beneath the water, the truth hidden in the mist. The Pythia's voice rises, her hands trembling, her face pale. The elder priest steps forward, his voice sharp. Enough. The vision is complete. The oracle has spoken. But the Pythia's voice does not stop. Her words twist and turn, strange images, wild whispers, her voice clear and fierce. The younger priests exchange uneasy glances. The pilgrims murmur, some frightened, others awed. The council's leader gestures, and two of his loyal priests step forward, their hands resting on the Pythia's shoulders. They whisper softly, calming her, and slowly her voice fades, her breathing slows. But the tension in the air is thick. After the ceremony in the shadowed halls of the temple, the council gathers angry, afraid. What happened demands one priest, his face pale. Her voice was wild, uncontrolled. The silver-bearded elder's gaze is cold, his voice calm but sharp. Someone tampered with the incense. Someone has tried to disrupt the oracle. Who? Another priest whispers, his eyes wide. Who would dare? But the elder priest's gaze is fixed, sharp and cold. I will find them, and when I do, they will be silenced. Lycos and his allies watch from the shadows, their hearts racing, their breaths held. They have shown the truth. The Pythia can speak without the council's whispers, but now they are in danger. The council will search for them. They will hunt them. But even in the cold shadows, even beneath the mist that clings to the sacred temple, Lycos feels a quiet, fierce joy. The oracle is not dead. The voice is still there, buried beneath the lies, and he will find it. He will bring it back. For even in a temple of shadows, even beneath the weight of falsehood, the light of truth still burns. And the council is afraid. The mist hangs heavy over Delphi, cold and thick, like a shroud pulled over a sleeping world. But beneath the ancient columns of the temple, beneath the quiet, solemn prayers of the priests, a shadow of fear begins to spread. The oracle's voice has changed, no longer the soft whispered riddles that the council controls, but something wild, something fierce. The council's elder, the silver-bearded man whose gaze is sharp as a blade, gathers his loyal priests in the shadowed chamber beneath the temple. The air is thick with the scent of burning incense, the flickering light casting long, twisted shadows against the cold stone walls. We have enemies among us. The elder's voice is cold, measured, but beneath it is a quiet rage. Someone has tampered with the incense. Someone has stirred the oracle to madness. The other priests murmur, their faces pale, their eyes darting nervously. The Pythia's wild, sharp words have unsettled them, words that were not shaped by the council's whispers, words that spoke of shadows and fire of truth hidden beneath the mist. One priest, a thin, nervous man with a trembling voice, speaks up. But perhaps it was a vision, elder. Perhaps Apollo is angry. The elder's cold gaze falls upon him sharp as a knife. Apollo speaks through us, through our wisdom. There are no visions without our guidance. The oracle is a vessel, nothing more. But if she speaks on her own, whispers another, his voice hesitant. Then she speaks madness, the elder snaps. And those who encouraged it will be silenced. But even as the council plots, Lycos and his allies gather in the quiet shadows of the temple gardens. Their faces are tense, their voices hushed, but there is a quiet spark in their eyes, a spark of hope. It worked, whispers young Callias, a sharp-eyed priest with a nervous smile. The Pythia spoke without their lies. She spoke truly. But we are not safe, murmurs Arian, another young priest, his face shadowed by doubt. The council is searching for us. If they find out it was us. Lycos's gaze is steady, his voice calm but fierce. They will try to silence us. But we are not just shadows in the temple. We are the light they fear. But what now? Callias asks, his voice a mix of excitement and fear. We cannot change the incense again. They will be watching. Lycos nods. No, we cannot risk another open move, but we can plant a seed. We can make them doubt. Arian frowns. How? By making the truth undeniable. Lycos whispers, his voice low but sharp. We will make the Pythia speak again without their guidance. We will show everyone that the oracle still speaks and that the council has stolen her voice. But this time, their plan must be subtle. No more tampering with the incense, no more reckless defiance. They must be ghosts, whispers in the shadows. They must use the council's own pride against them. The next day, as the cold mist rises over the temple, Lycos and his allies begin their quiet work. They speak softly to the younger priests, those who serve, but do not yet bow to the council's iron grip. They share quiet doubts, whispered questions. Did you hear the Pythia yesterday? One whispers. Her voice was clear, like the oracles of old. I heard she spoke of a hidden fire, a shadow beneath the light. Do you think, could it be true? Could the oracle still speak? And the whispers spread through the colonnades, through the laurel groves, even in the sacred spring's quiet waters. Doubt is a flame, and once lit, it cannot be easily smothered. But Lycos knows whispers alone are not enough. They must make the Pythia speak again, truly clearly, without the council's shadow. And so they begin to watch, to wait, to learn the council's rituals. They see how the incense is prepared, how the Pythia is led to the sacred chamber, how the priests whisper in her ear. And they see something else, something that sends a chill down Lycos's spine. One evening, as the mist thickens and the sun sinks behind the mountains, Lycos watches from the shadowed colonnade as the Pythia is led to her chamber. Her steps are slow, her face pale, her eyes dull. And then he sees it, a small silver cup pressed to her lips by one of the elder priests, a thick sweet liquid poured gently into her mouth. A drug, not just incense, something more, something to cloud her mind, to soften her thoughts, to turn her into a pliant voice for their whispered words. Lycos clenches his fists, his breath cold and sharp. They are not just twisting the oracle's words, they are poisoning her, turning her into a puppet. But now he understands. If they can free the Pythia from this poison, if they can keep her mind clear, she can speak truly again. She can be the voice of Apollo once more. But how the council watches her carefully. Their loyal priests guard her chamber, and the silver cup is brought by the elder himself. Yet even as the shadows close in, a plan begins to form, a desperate, dangerous plan. They cannot stop the priests directly, but they can deceive them. The next night, as the mists cling thick to the temple, Lycos and his allies act. They approach one of the young priests who serves the sacred wine, a nervous boy named Ion, his hands always trembling, his voice soft. "Do you know what you serve?" Lycos whispers, his voice gentle but sharp. "Do you know that it is not wine, but a poison?" Ion's face pales, his wide eyes filling with fear. But it is the sacred drink, for the Pythia's blessing. It is a poison, Lycos insists. It is what makes her weak, what dulls her voice. The oracle has become a prisoner. Ion's hands tremble, his lips parting in horror. But the priests, they say it is holy. They lie, whispers Callias, stepping forward. But you can save her. You can serve her pure water, water from the sacred spring. Ion's face is pale, his breathing fast. But after a long, trembling moment, he nods. The next morning, as the priests gather, as the silver cup is brought to the Pythia, it is Ion who carries it. His hands shake, but his face is calm, and within the cup is clear, cold water, pure sweet, untouched by the council's poison. The Pythia drinks her pale lips, parting, her dull eyes growing sharp. And as she is led to the sacred chamber, as the incense rises, her voice begins to murmur, soft at first, then strong. I see the darkness beneath the light. I see the hands that twist the truth. I see the shadows whispering lies. The elder priest's face grows pale, his eyes sharp with fear. He steps forward, his voice rising. Enough, the oracle is weary. She must rest. But the Pythia's voice rises clear, fierce. The truth cannot be silenced. The light cannot be hidden. The voice of Apollo will not be stolen. Lycos watches from the shadows, his heart racing. The council's mask is cracking. The light is breaking through. But as the priests lead the Pythia away, the elder's cold gaze sweeps the chamber. His voice is calm, but his eyes burn with quiet rage. Find them, he whispers to his loyal priests. Those who would sow discord, those who dare to defy us. Bring them to me. And now Lycos knows that their battle is no longer in the shadows. The council is watching. The light has been kindled, but the darkness is closing in. The mist clings to Delphi like a cold gray shroud, but beneath the sacred columns of the temple, the air is thick with whispers, tense and sharp as a drawn blade. The Pythia has spoken truly fiercely, her voice breaking through the council's shadowed control. But now the council stirs their quiet anger, turning to a silent hunt. Lycos and his allies move like ghosts among the temple's colonnades, their hearts racing, their eyes sharp. They speak in hushed tones, their faces hidden beneath their white hoods, but there is fear in their voices. They are searching for us. Callias whispers, his sharp eyes darting nervously. The elder has ordered every Brast questioned. 3 of the younger priests have vanished, murmurs Arian, his face pale, taken in the night. No one knows where they are. Lycos's jaw clenches his fists, trembling beneath his robes. He knows what is happening. The council is purging the temple, rooting out dissent, crushing any who dare to question their power. And the young priests, those who whispered of truth, who dared to listen to the Pythia's unclouded voice, are being silenced. But Lycos cannot abandon them. He cannot let the light he has kindled be snuffed out. They are afraid. He whispers, his voice fierce but quiet. They know the truth is slipping from their grasp. But we are not powerless. We have seen the Pythia speak truly. We know she can be freed. But how Callias asks, his voice filled with quiet despair. They guard her now closer than ever. They will drown her in that poisoned wine. They will make her a puppet again. Lycos's gaze hardens. Then we must free her, not just her voice, but her life. Their plan is desperate, reckless. But there is no other way. That night, as the silver moon rises over the mist-shrouded mountains, Lycos and his allies gather in the shadowed laurel grove, their faces pale, but their eyes burning with quiet resolve. We will take her. Lycos whispers, his voice steady. We will free her from the temple, take her to the mountains, to the caves where the mist still rises. There, she can speak without their poison, without their whispers. But the council will hunt us, Arian warns. They will not rest until we are silenced. Then we must move quickly, Lycos replies. We will strike at dawn, when the temple is quiet, when the priests still sleep. And so, in the cold, misty darkness before dawn, Lycos and his allies make their way through the silent colonnades, their white robes fluttering like pale ghosts. The air is sharp with the scent of laurel, the ground damp beneath their bare feet. The great temple of Apollo looms before them, its columns rising like ancient giants, the flickering light of braziers casting long shadows. They know the way, the hidden paths, the shadowed corridors, the secret doors known only to the temple's servants. And as the first pale light of dawn touches the mountain peaks, they reach the Pythia's chamber. She is there seated upon her bed, her face pale, her eyes distant. But when she sees them, her gaze sharpens, a faint spark of hope flickering in her weary eyes. Lycos, she whispers, her voice a faint trembling breath. Is it truly you? It is, Lycos whispers, kneeling beside her, his voice fierce but gentle. We are here to free you. The other priests watch the door, their hands trembling, their faces pale. They know that at any moment the council's guards could appear. But Lycos is steady, his hands gentle, as he helps the Pythia stand. They will hunt you, she murmurs, her voice soft but clear. They will call you heretics, traitors. They will brand you as enemies of Apollo. Let them, Lycos whispers, his gaze sharp. We know the truth, and soon so will all of Delphi. They move quickly, guiding her through the shadowed corridors, through the quiet laurel grove, their footsteps silent on the damp earth. The mist is thick, swirling around them, but Lycos leads them with a sure step he knows, the mountain paths, the hidden trails that wind through the dense forest. But behind them, a distant shout echoes a cry of alarm, of anger. The council has discovered their escape. Hurry! Callias hisses, his voice sharp with fear. They are coming. The Pythia stumbles, her breathing heavy, but Lycos supports her, his arms steady around her shoulders. We are almost there. Do not stop. They climb the path, twisting the mist, growing thinner. The silver light of dawn breaks through the trees, casting pale, ghostly rays across the rocky slopes. And then they see it, a dark, jagged cave, its mouth hidden beneath a tangle of laurel branches, a faint, swirling mist rising from within. This is it. Lycos whispers, a quiet, fierce joy in his voice. The sacred mist, the true breath of the earth. But there is no time for relief. The shouts are growing louder, the heavy, thunderous footsteps of the temple guards crashing through the underbrush. The council's men are close. Lycos turns his voice fierce. Go hide in the cave. I will hold them. No, Callias cries, his face pale with fear. They will kill you. Then I will die knowing the truth is free. Lycos whispers, a quiet, fierce fire in his gaze. Go! The Pythia hesitates, her pale, trembling hand reaching for him. Lycos. But he smiles a soft, gentle smile. Your voice is the light, Pythia. You must speak truly. For all of Delphi. And then she is gone, her pale form vanishing into the mist-shrouded cave, Callias and Arion guiding her, their footsteps lost in the swirling fog. Lycos stands alone beneath the gray misty sky, his white robes stained with damp earth, his dark hair tangled in the cold wind. The shouts grow louder, the guards bursting from the trees, their faces twisted with anger, their spears gleaming in the pale light. Seize him! One shouts, his voice sharp as a blade. In the name of the council, but Lycos does not run. He stands tall, his gaze fierce, his voice clear. You serve lies. He cries, his voice ringing against the mountains. The oracle is not yours. The voice of Apollo belongs to the light, not to your shadows. The guards surge forward, their spears rising, but Lycos does not flinch. His voice is strong, his gaze steady. Let the truth be heard, he shouts. Let the light burn away your darkness. The first spear strikes a sharp, cold pain, tearing through his side. He stumbles, his vision blurring, but his voice does not falter. The truth cannot be silenced. And then darkness takes him. But deep within the mist-shrouded cave, the Pythia breathes the cool, sweet air, her trembling voice growing strong, her gaze clear and fierce, and her words rise sharp and true, a light in the darkness. I am the voice of Apollo. I speak not for men, but for the light. Let those who seek the truth find it. Let those who hide in shadows be revealed. And her voice carries like a whisper upon the wind down the misty slopes of Mount Parnassus, across the shadowed colonnades of Delphi. For the oracle is free, and her voice cannot be silenced. The mist drapes over Delphi soft and cool, like a quiet whisper that calms the world. The grand columns of Apollo's temple stand tall and silent, their ancient stones bathed in the pale silver light of dawn. The laurel trees rustle gently in the cold breeze, their leaves shimmering with drops of dew. But beneath that quiet stillness, something has changed. Deep in the hidden cave, the sacred mist swirls a faint ghostly breath rising from the earth. The Pythia sits, her eyes clear, her voice calm, her words flowing like a quiet, steady stream. She speaks not to kings, not to priests, but to the whispering air, her voice a song of truth, untouched by shadows. In the temple, far below the council's halls, stand dark and cold. The priests whisper of treachery, of rebels hiding in the mountains. They speak of Lycos, brave, foolish Lycos, who stood against them, whose voice rose against their lies. Some call him a traitor. Others speak of him as a martyr, a flame that burned too brightly. But the truth has a way of slipping through even the thickest shadows. And in the quiet corners of Delphi, in the murmurs of the pilgrims, a new story begins to spread, a story of a young priest who dared to defy the darkness, who gave his life so that the oracle could speak truly once more. And as the sun rises, the mist of Delphi seems lighter, the air fresher, the light a little brighter. For though the shadows may linger, the light has not gone. The voice of Apollo is free. And somewhere in the cool, misty wind, a whisper drifts. Truth cannot be silenced, light cannot be hidden. Sweet dreams.